This is treatment-free beekeeping, where we talk about the steps you can take or what it's like to try to keep bees treatment-free. From the beginning to hopefully a successful end, we'll go through the process as we experience it in our life on Wildflower Bee Farm. This is treatment-free beekeeping. Let's get started. This is Hank. How are you doing today? It's been a busy week. I'm sure you are as well. If if you do have bees, if you're on the YouTube channel, thank you for watching and subscribing. You're seeing a entrance. It's actually an upper entrance. This is a weird hive that I'll be talking about today, but it's a swarm that came and decided to live in this hive that was empty all winter. They had the previous hive had passed before the winter. The front of the hive has a mouse guard on it, but this top area does not, obviously, but it didn't seem to have an impact. Now, when I went in the other day to look, there were no mouse nests or any mouse mummified or anything, so for some reason the mice didn't move in, which is kind of interesting. So today's topic, I'm going to do a review of the hives, but I also want to talk a little bit about this idea of what you can learn by watching what the bees are doing. And one of the things that have come up, and I've done a lot of digging and I really can't find any science behind it, is there any indication what's happening in the hive if the bees are or are not bringing in pollen? Now there's two really ways to think about it. Now you can see this hive here, there's drones coming out, there are bees going in with pollen. But there also, remember, there is a lower entrance, and you'd think that this would be an entrance up high where the bees would come in and bring more nectar than pollen, because it's higher and closer to the upper box that I just added. And I do a separate video on that of what was happening and why. But this is sort of a number of factors to think of. So when I look at this, and I've been watching some of my hives that I split, and I know they don't have queens in them. And the majority do not bring in any significant pollen. So I started looking at a percentage. So if I count 10 bees coming in, which is hard here, I have to slow it down sometimes. What percent of the bees coming in have pollen? Now it's based on a couple of factors. The time of day, obviously, because different flowers have different patterns. The needs of the hive. So, you know, what does the hive need today? Does it need pollen or nectar? Where is it at? In this case, location of the entrance, because there's two entrances going on and I can only video one. I wonder what the rate would be of pollen coming into the lower entrances. Now the problem is the mouse guard is the entire width of the entrance, so you can't really video one spot and have it indicate the total amount coming in. This hive, it looks like in excess of 50% of the time bees are bringing in pollen, but it depends. There's a wave of bees that come in, so if I pick that sample of 10, I'm over 60%. If I pick another, I am under that number. Sorry, I had to cough there. So one of the things I'm starting to look at is the percent probability that I'm correct. Now let's think about that for a minute. You're never 100% correct. Even if you open the hive and look, you will see and find nothing, and you'll think there's no queen. There's no eggs, there's no larvae, and so on. But that's not always true, especially with different strains. For example, this, I believe, is a Russian swarm. Now, I'll talk a bit about that as well in a second, because I'm not sure where they came from, given what I've been doing with these hives. The point of all this, I think the probability, so when I see bees less than 50% bringing in pollen, I'm about 75% sure I need to check, because there may not be a queen. In my experience, when bees are over 75%, sometimes 60, depending on the day, but over 75% bringing in pollen, then something's going on in the sense of they're feeding babies, or they're getting ready to. And so that tells me it's probably more likely to be healthy than not. But you have to add that with what I call the psychological profile of the hive. What's their behavior like? Do they seem purposeful? Do they seem like they're taking care of things, preparing the home? And you can see in this swarm, you have some bees on the outside working away, trying to get rid of some of this gross paint that seems to be there from many, many years ago. And so these bees are basically giving us all kinds of signals about what might be going on inside the hive. The question I have for you would be, when you look at the pollen coming in and out, now many people say bees bring in pollen regardless. And that's probably, in some cases, true, but probably not the smartest hive on the planet, unless they believe they have a limited amount of forage and they're preparing for the future. Now, in our case here, now let's put that in the context of the habitat here. The habitat is diverse. There's probably 20 plus flowers blooming right now. Many clovers. We have some what's called bee balm, black-eyed Susans. We have all kinds of flowers blooming right now. But very shortly, and we just saw one open up the other day, we're going to have 50 acres of goldenrod. The goldenrod is everywhere. It's taking over some of the areas, particularly where we used to have thistle. We still have a bit of thistle, thankfully, but the majority of the farm is now in goldenrod when it's outside of the forest region. And even within the forest where the green ash was, we have goldenrod. So you could argue that the bees may be getting ready, because the bees do know. Now, let's look at this swarm. So this swarm moved in probably within the past 2 to 3 weeks. And it really does look like it may have been a swarm of Russian bees. You could argue they're carnies, and unless you do some specific type of testing, you wouldn't know. But they certainly do appear to be similar to the hives that we have now that are populated by the Russian queens we brought in. So this is a fascinating watch. I'm going to leave it on for a total of 10 minutes if you're on the YouTube channel to watch, and if you want to practice. I'd be interested to know too if you do take percent type of pollen versus no pollen based on the status of your hive. But there's so many other variables, like what flowers are available. And again, what your bees need. Again, I'm fascinated by alpha bees. What do the alpha bees signal that they need in the hive? And what are the bees doing to go get that material? I find it fascinating, too, the number of drones that swarmed with this hive. I know it's common to say that, swarms are included, drones are included in swarms, and that's part of it. But that's quite a significant number of drones if you watch for a while and see. The second part is this is an old box that's been around for about 5 years and always seems to be habitated by bees. And I don't know if it's because they like the upper entrance as well as the lower, or if they just like the upper because it would give them a bit more security. It's a smaller entrance. But on other times I've thought of closing this off because of ventilation in the winter. So I really don't know. Currently, there's an upper box I put on because there were so many bees on the outside. This was a massive swarm, and I'll be talking about that in future podcasts. So this is Hank for Treatment-Free Beekeeping at the Wildflower Bee Farm. My question to you is, what pollen coming in, what does that mean to you? Not just the species of the flowers, perhaps. And by the way, I've had a heck of a time finding a really good source for identifying pollen by time of the year, by location. If anyone knows of an app out there, let me know. I'd love to have a look at it. Again, this is Hank for Treatment-Free Beekeeping at the Wildflower Bee Farm. You have an amazing day, and we'll talk soon.